When people think of pirates, they tend to think of Hollywood swashbuckling heroes of the sea. But the real golden age of piracy, however, remains contentious, with many believing it to have taken place between the years 1650 and 1720. Today, we meet Roderick the Rambunctious, a man who's been wrestling in Southampton for several years to raise money for charity. He agreed to meet with Past Quirks to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions behind piracy, and this is what he had to say. Hello there, everybody. So, welcome again to Past Quirks, and I've got a nice surprise for everyone now because I'm talking to a real-life pirate. So, hello there, Roderick. How are you?
Hey, hello, me old mate. Yes, that's right. I am Roderick Rackham, also known as Roderick the Rambunctious.
Out of interest, have you been drinking, good sir?
No, absolutely not, me old mate. I am displaced in time. That's my excuse, and I am sticking to it. I wouldn't touch a drop of anything else.
What about cream soda?
Well, you never know, do you?
So you're a golden age pirate then. So assuming you got over the jet lag coming to this time and place, could you explain a bit more about golden age piracy for those who don't know about it?
Absolutely. It's the age which people think about when they think of pirates. It depends who you ask, really. Most people would claim it's the time after privateering. Though most sailors who were out of, when it was out of wartime, then sailors were out of work, and most of them then needed money, so they took to a life of crime on the seas in order to do that. Now, piracy itself comes from the Greek word pirate, meaning to attack. So any attacking and any stealing, any crime on the sea counts as piracy. The golden age of piracy, people say, is 30 years after privateering. If people include privateering, it's longer.
Oh, wow, that's interesting then, because if I'm right in thinking, you actually ended up being a privateer against the Spanish for a couple of years, didn't you? And then obviously there's this whole thing about you getting lost and people not knowing what's happened to you. So presumably then that's what happened when you time traveled here, isn't it? I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And people don't believe me. I tell you, all the things that are happening nowadays, and it's the idea of a time traveling pirate that they find hard to believe.
So where does your name Rambunctious actually come from then?
The word rambunctious has the same meaning as the word rumbustious. Both of these are the same word, but they just sort of changed over time and now are recognized as two separate words, even though technically they start off as the same word. What people don't realize, what a lot of people don't realize anyway, is that the drink, rum, used to have a different name, a name that time has forgotten. Now, even in recent years, since my time displacement, I've actually traveled to the Caribbean, and I couldn't find anyone over there that remembered the original name of the drink either. Locals were aware that it did used to have a different name. And what happened was, during days such as the golden age of piracy, sailors used to drink this drink. They became wild and out of control, i.e. rambunctious or rumbustious, and they started to call the drink rum. And that's where the name comes from.
Wow, because you actually have a fan, don't you, called, I think, Roxy the Rambunctious?
Roxy the Rambunctious, not just a family of me, but me chief wench. I have had several wenches walk me to the ring over the years. Several of them became lost. No one knew what happened to them. Some people claimed the last time we were due to see them, it was actually snowing at the wrestling arena. And people think that just the same way that I became displaced in time, they might have become frozen and therefore displaced in time as well. They might thaw out in the future at some point. The fans wanted more winches. I wanted more winches. And then Roxy, the rumbustious, the most beautiful young lass I've ever seen in my whole life, started to appear.
Then what pirates do then if they get misplaced in time, I'm assuming that's why they become wrestlers. That's why because they can already sort of handle themselves on ship. Is that right?
That is true.
Well, what are the biggest misconceptions then about pirates that we hold now? Because I know obviously walking the plank is a 19th century invention, isn't it, allegedly?
There are some historians that believe that walking the plank didn't happen at all. And it was invented by fanciful books that have been written since, such as Treasure Island. There have been some historians that claim that one pirate or one or two pirates might have done it. And then it got written in books. And then everyone assumes that everyone did it, or at least that's where the fantasy comes out of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now, these times were absolutely desperate times. People did not have money. People did not have much. And these people that turned to piracy were absolutely desperate. Most pirates had an outlook on life of a short one, a rich life, if a short life. But what I mean by that is that when people turned to a life of piracy, if they were caught, because they were breaking the law, they would be hanged. The average life expectancy of someone who became a pirate was 2 years. People really, this really was a desperate move. It probably would not have been a fun life. The idea is it would have been a better life than what they would have had otherwise, but it would have been a desperate decision in desperate times.
So you actually got away pretty lucky then, didn't you?
People don't realise is they talk about what pirates used to take. Right? There's ideas they go and take treasure. Right? This came from privateering. Privateers obviously would take stuff and they would be allowed by their monarch to then have those things, or they give those to their monarch. The monarch would be happy and they would pay the privateer. What would a criminal, when it was outlawed and these pirates were pirates, not privateers anymore, what would they do with gold? If they were found selling the gold, they'd be in trouble just like a criminal nowadays. They wouldn't need treasure and gold and jewelry. What they'd need is whatever they'd need to stay alive, living this life on the sea. So they would be taking food. They would be taking any drink, and they would need alcohol. They would want alcohol to keep themselves merry. Well, as we've said, they weren't merry, but to keep themselves in this in some sort of fancy lifestyle, right? They would be needing fruit to combat scurvy. They would be needing soap. They would be needing people. If they needed a navigator or a cook, they would take those people. And if you were taken to be a cook or a navigator, it would be up to the rest of the people. So, for example, you would be on a boat. Your boat would be invaded by pirates. You would be taken away against your will, and it would be up to the rest of your crew to then write to the authorities, tell the authorities that you were taken against your will, so that if ever that band of pirates were captured, you would not be hanged along with them. Obviously, there is this fantastical idea that they would bury treasure. There is at least one example of treasure being buried, and it actually came from Sir Francis Drake. Now, Sir Francis Drake obviously was a privateer. Many historians would argue he was one of the first Golden Age pirates, and that he was a great one.
He was known as El Draco, wasn't he? I think he served Elizabeth I, is that right?
Absolutely, he did. Scourge of the Spanish, who would have viewed him as a pirate. Obviously, he was attacking their ships, so to them, he was a pirate. Whereas to the English, he was a privateer. Now, on one occasion, I'm not sure what happened here. I'm hazy as to the details, but he either found a Spanish galleon that was sunk and full of treasure, or that he sunk the ship. But whatever, this sunken ship was so full of treasure, he could only get some of it on his boat to take back to England. So he then buried some treasure, so legend goes, and then had to send another ship back for it. And that is possibly where this fantastical idea of buried treasure comes from.
It does make sense, because it's obviously a bit before your time, isn't it? It's at least 100 years or so before your time, yeah. So how does it compare then to sort of wrestling?
I think one of the main things is the need for theatrics. So Blackbeard is someone, historians believe he might have been Edward Teach. That might have been his real name. People often pride themselves of knowing that his name is Edward Teach. His whole thing, the whole thing about him, was that he was terrifying. Okay, now he was 6'4". Now, wow. 6'4" is pretty intimidating in these standards. In these modern standards.
Yeah.
This was back 300 odd years ago. because people didn't quite have the same stature as they do now. What Blackbeard would do, now this is something that people do often know about, and this is where his theatrics really come in. He actually would put lit fuses in his beard. So people would see this smolder coming out of his beard, even flames on some occasion, and he would have a demonic appearance. All pirates had the brand of the black flag. So whenever you saw the black flag coming up, you knew you were in trouble. And then different pirates started taking this further. The skull and crossbones belonged to one particular pirate. Blackbeard's flag was a demon putting a dagger through a heart. That was his thing. Now, when people saw Blackbeards coming, they usually surrendered because they'd heard all the rumors of this demonic, huge, monstrous man, and they were scared of him. And Blackbeard didn't really have to do much. Presumably, he would have won a few battles early on, then rumor would have spread, and then once they saw his logo come in, they would surrender. Ultimately, a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Maynard, who actually killed Blackbeard.
Wow.
There were lots of rumors, even after Blackbeard's death, about how when he had a Rasputin sort of death. He was shot several times, hung several times. It's even said that when his head was severed and his body was thrown into the sea, his body then swam around the boat several times. So people in those days, were superstitious. And that superstition and those rumors could really be used to people's advantage. And it's that sense of theatrics that I think would mean that my crew would not be surprised to learn on me boat the excuse that I had become a wrestler. So those are pretty much my common misconceptions of life on the seven seas back in the golden age time.
Thank you very much, Roderick. So that has been then Roderick the Rambunctious. Just like to say a big thank you for taking the time to obviously talk with us today. And R from us.
Hey.